Hello, my name is Prior Chad, and I'm the vicar at St. Augustine's Episcopal Parish in Tempe, Arizona. This video introduction is intended to give you some context for a sermon that I delivered at St. A's on September 27th, 2015. The primary bit of context has to do with the Pope's visit to the U.S. over the last week, and in particular his speech to a joint session of the U.S. Congress on Thursday, September 24th. I used that occasion to reflect a bit about the relationship of the Episcopal Church and the Anglican Communion to the Pope and to the Roman Church in general. And I used the Pope's words to frame some of my discussion about today's Gospel reading from Mark chapter 9. I hope that you're able to hear the prophetic voice of the Pope in this sermon as I reflect upon his words. And I hope that you'll take the occasion to actually listen to the Pope's speech yourself. Blessings upon you, and enjoy. Let no evil talk come out of thy mouth, but only what is useful for building up as there is need, so that my words may give grace to those who hear. In the name of the Holy and undivided Trinity. Amen. Amen. During the long pontificate of now St. John Paul II. And despite the anti-Catholic environment of my upbringing, it's his smiling face and gentle voice that became a prominent fixture in my memory of the era by way of the morning paper and the nightly news. Now, when I hear the word Pope, it's the image of John Paul II that first comes to mind for me. And I would imagine the same is true for many in my generation, whether Roman Catholic or not. The first image that my boys will see, however, when they hear talk of the Pope throughout their lives, will likely be of a different smile, radiating from beneath a simple white skull cap. And it's my hope that they will have ample occasion, despite the fact that we don't get the daily paper or own a television, to hear and remember the sound of his voice in the world. We in the Anglican tradition do not recognize the authority of the Pope over our churches, but we do recognize the Pope's importance as the Bishop of Rome in Christ's one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church. And we are not so much anti-Catholic as we are unwilling to concede our claim to Catholicity to Rome. That said, our life in the Episcopal Church cannot be neatly extracted from the Roman Catholic Church. We've been stirred together in the same cultural soup. And among denominations typically labeled as Protestant, our flavor is the most unmistakably influenced by Rome. When the Pope speaks, therefore, we can listen to his voice and know that his words will flavor the character of our life together, whether we agree with those words or not. It's always been this way for us as Anglicans. The big question is not whether we will be influenced, but what will be the nature of that influence. What changes will we make to our liturgies in response to a voice that calls for an ecumenical council, for example? What pitfalls might we avoid by learning what not to do from a voice that fails to fully acknowledge his church's egregious sins? I'm sure many of you have either read, listened to, or been exposed to in some significant way the voice of Pope Francis as he addressed a joint session of Congress this past Thursday. His was a moving voice, profoundly gentle, and yet completely unafraid to speak truth to some of the most powerful people in the world. In many ways, Pope Francis stood before the government of the United States and, like Julie described so well last week, removed the collective pair of glasses Martin Luther King, liberty and plurality and non-exclusion. Dorothy Day, social justice and the rights of persons. And Thomas Merton, the capacity for dialogue and openness to God. End quote. I would love to unpack Pope Francis's presentation of each of these dreams, but I encourage you rather, if you have not done so already, and even if you have, to find the speech online and read it for yourself. Or better yet, listen to the sound of his voice delivering it last Thursday. It's well worth your time. For our short time together this morning, however, I would like to focus primarily on the Pope's discussion of the fourth dream, that of Thomas Merton, as it relates to today's Gospel from Mark in chapter 9. The Pope, in his speech, quoted from Merton's autobiography, The Seven-Story Mountain. And the quote is a testament to one way that the American conception of freedom and liberty is actually an upside-down vision of true freedom. Merton writes, quote, "I came into the world free by nature, in the image of God. I was, nevertheless, the prisoner of my own violence and my own selfishness, in the image of the world into which I was born. That world was a picture of hell, full of men like myself, loving God and yet hating him, born to love him, living instead in fear of hopeless, self-contradictory hungers." What a poignant description of our lot as human beings, and particularly of our lot as Americans. In the name of freedom, we find ourselves locked up in an economy of violence and fear that feeds the military-industrial complex to a greater degree than in any other nation on the globe. And in the name of freedom, we find ourselves shackled to hopeless, self-contradictory hungers that drive consumer spending in the vain pursuits of material happiness and of endless, unmitigated economic growth. We cannot conceive of safety by means other than the use of force. We cannot conceive of enough by means other than obtaining more. Though free by nature and by national creed, we are in fact, as Merton says of himself, prisoners of our own violence and our own selfishness, in the image of the world into which we were born. A world that he says is the picture of hell. In the gospel passage for today, we hear Jesus teaching about how to avoid such a world. Through a rather macabre extended metaphor, Jesus makes clear that if we are to live in a different kind of world, in a world full of God's life, and not a hellish prison made of our own violence and selfishness, it will come at a great cost to life as we know it, to business as usual. Jesus' instructions about the various kinds of dismemberment are pointing to the painful fact that key parts of ourselves, parts that may serve us very well in the short term of our life in a culture of dominance and consumerism, do not serve us well in the long term of our life with God. If I am to be at home in a culture of peacefulness and of concern for the well-being of all, I must be separated from those things that are most useful in my selfish pursuit of power and resources for me and mine. Peacemaking and working for the common good. This is the culture of God's household, of God's kingdom, what Jesus simply calls life. It is to the culture of God's kingdom that Pope Francis was seeking to acclimate the U.S. Congress during his speech on Thursday. And consistent with Jesus' declaration at the conclusion of our Gospel from Mark this morning, that everyone will be salted with fire, which is a reference to sacrifice. We can hear the salt and fire of the Pope's call to our government. In his own words, if politics must truly be at the service of the human person, it follows that it cannot be a slave to the economy and finance. Politics is instead an expression of our compelling need to live as one, in order to build as one the greatest common good, that of a community which sacrifices particular interests in order to share in justice and peace, its goods, its interests, its social life. And he says, I do not underestimate the difficulty that this involves, but I encourage you in this effort. As Jesus goes on to teach, the salt of sacrifice is good, but not because it's easy or painless. It's good because it loosens our grasp on that which keeps us trapped in a culture of violence and selfishness, in a common life enslaved to the economy and finance, a life that is the picture of hell, like murder describes. The salt is good because it frees us to live as our true selves, created in the image of God, as those whose vision of the greatest good is a vision of the greatest common good, and as those who are at home in God's household. When we have this salt in ourselves, this salt of sacrifice that severs our grasp on dominating power and wealth, we are able to truly be at peace with one another, as Jesus calls us to be. The voice of the Pope will undoubtedly have an influence on our life in the Episcopal Church. This is how it has always been, and how it will always be. And while we are not under the ecclesiastical authority of the Bishop of Rome, let us be grateful that the voice of Pope Francis is a voice that bids us all to see the world as God sees it. And let us open our hearts to receive and heed his call to be a community which sacrifices particular interests in order to share in the common good. This is a call out from the prison of our own violence and selfishness and into the peaceable and equitable culture of God's own life. And we ought not underestimate the difficulty involved in such sacrifice, but we can gratefully accept the encouragement we receive from the voice of a prophet.